Paul McCartney is awake well after midnight. The home is silent in a way that feels strange, not empty, but reflective. It's the kind of quietness that makes memories louder. The walls don't honor him, they bring back memories for him. For a second, it seems like he's going to name only one band. Somehow one name history got lost. But that thought doesn't endure because Paul thinks the truth is worse. There were 5, not 1. 5 bands that never got what they wanted. Not because they failed, but because people weren't paying enough attention. And the first name makes me feel sad. Badfinger. This one still hurts more than most because the cut never truly healed. Badfinger had the tunes. They felt it. They were emotionally honest in a way that Paul could tell right away. The kind that seems easy on the outside, but has something frail and vulnerable underneath. Songs that didn't scream how great they were, but let you feel it. They ought to have been giants, not someday, but right now. Paul recognized himself in them. The ability to make music, the need to be kind, and the confidence that excellent songs would be enough. And that knowledge makes what happened next even tougher to deal with. Instead of becoming better, things slowly fell apart because of bad management, deception, and promises that became bad. Contracts turned into traps. Music was substituted by meetings. Paul watched their talent go away behind courtrooms and legalese, helpless as momentum turned into sorrow. What could have been a bright, happy future turned into something gloomy, quiet, and permanent. This wasn't a failure. It was stealing. They weren't undervalued because they weren't terrific. They were not given enough credit since they trusted the wrong individuals and lost everything because of that trust. That information stays with Paul in an uncomfortable way because it makes him think about something he can never really get away from. How many other brilliant bands have been lost not because they weren't good enough, but because the world knows how to take advantage of innocence? Just thinking about that makes Paul think of a band that had a different, quieter kind of trouble. The Kinks. The Kinks were too smart for their own good, too British and too perceptive. While other people were looking for universality, Ray Davies wrote about his own life, including streets, families, neighbors, boredom, pride, and quiet irritation. Songs that didn't ask for attention but slowly revealed themselves, like talks you could hear through thin walls. No, that's how people get going. You start out loving what you do, but you have to pay the bills. But the best part is that these songs get stuck in people's heads and have this meaning. Paul really liked that. It took courage to do it, but he also saw how much it would cost, and that was bad. Band tours in the US were cut short just as they were starting to gain steam. Albums full of new ideas and insights become cult classics instead of cultural milestones. It hurt extra harder since they were so close. There are so many songs that could have changed the whole sound of pop music. If only the time had been better. If only the industry had been more patient. If only people had valued nuance as much as show. They didn't become less important, they were not given it. And that denial stayed with him like a quiet wrong. Because bigger bands got more attention for yelling, while the Kinks were punished for noticing and articulating subtle truths in a world enamored with large gestures. From there, his thoughts stray to a band that was always changing. A lot of traffic. The industry could never categorize traffic because it never stopped moving, and that refusal progressively hurt them. One moment folk, the next jazz, and then it drifts off to a whole other place. They were restless, curious, and didn't want to say the same thing again and over merely to feel safe. Steve Winwood went after feelings instead of logic and intuition instead of certainties. Paul had a lot of respect for that choice, but he also felt sorry because he knew how the industry treats artists who won't settle. The world likes things that are simple, clear, and easy to understand. Traffic turned down all of it, and because of this, their genius was spread out instead of focused, and they were praised instead being crowned. While other bands made things easier to stay alive, Traffic made things worse. Instead of growing forth, they grew within. Their music didn't give answers. It posed questions and made people feel things instead of singing anthems. That made them tougher to market and easier to miss. They were not inconsistent. They were looking. And that search cost something. The momentum faded. People's minds drifted. Traffic kept flowing forward even if fewer people followed. Others learned how to be visible. Paul knew all too well what pain was like. Sometimes the most honest music doesn't win. It's the kind that won't stop changing. Then comes a name that always seemed to be a little off. The Undead. The Zombies made things beautiful without needing to. There were subtle harmonies, sad melodies, and songs that quietly built up, urging the listener to lean in instead than yelling for attention. Paul always felt a quiet connection to that way of thinking, since music like this doesn't compete. It waits. It has faith in the listener. Paul also recognized that those kinds of songs don't win races very often. They don't rule the charts or blow up right away. They become older without making a fuss. They slowly get into people's life and then remain longer than they planned. The Zombies stayed in the background, patient and unnoticed, while the noisier bands burnt out quickly, looking for impact and immediacy. Their records didn't require loyalty, they asked for it. And in a world full of noise, it's easy to overlook invites. The most painful thing was how often people thought they were small, safe, or decorative. Critics overlooked the tension underlying the sweetness and the emotional weight that was hidden behind those lovely arrangements. The Undead weren't weak, they were held back. Paul recognized that restraint is often seen as weakness. They didn't make a mistake since they weren't ambitious. It wasn't because they weren't good at what they did, it was soft. And in a time when volume and certainty were prized, softness was discreetly pushed aside. And finally, there was one band that Paul thought history moved too swiftly for. Faces. Faces possessed heart, messiness, and soul. They sounded like pals who were playing for fun, not to be flawless. Their songs had sweat in them, and there was laughing between the notes. They seemed honest instead of casual. Rod Stewart's voice has grit, comedy, and tenderness all at once, like someone stating the truth without caring how it might sound. Paul heard something that doesn't happen very often there. Not ambition polished for charts, but delight played in real time. Music that didn't show off, music that didn't act like it was more significant than it was. He knew that this made people uneasy because they never took Faces seriously enough. They were called untidy, transitory, and transitional. Critics said they were just a phase, not a statement. But Paul heard a band that was able to keep a feeling that most groups lose when they learn how to act when they are successful. They didn't sound like they were done. They sounded liberated. And they had to pay for that independence. It's easy to ignore joy. Discipline makes joy look casual. In a world that likes control, joy doesn't last long. And Paul realized that joy is frequently not given enough credit. Paul lets out a long breath as if he's finally putting something down that he's been carrying for years. These bands had a lot of talent. They didn't have protection, time, or patience, and they needed someone to step in before things got out of hand. And that leaves him with a thought that still bothers him long after the list is over. How many brilliant bands have gone by the wayside not because they weren't good enough, but because people only celebrate things they can easily understand? Some bands blow up, while others quietly last. And sometimes the best music is the kind that you have to wait to get into. Paul thinks about the concept for a long time, longer than he thought he would. Not angry or happy, just honest. The kind of honesty that comes with witnessing great things happen, fail, and occasionally go away without a word for decades. He realizes now that being underappreciated doesn't entail being forgotten. It often means being misunderstood at the wrong time, being too kind in a loud time, being too thoughtful in a time that prizes quickness, or being too human when the world wants a show. Some bands come before the crowd understands how to pay attention. Some people write songs that don't erupt when they hit, but instead stay silent and wait for years for the perfect age, the appropriate heartbreak, and the right quietness. And that makes him less angry. Maybe the true measure of brilliance isn't how loudly history cheers at the time, but how profoundly the song lingers with you after the clamor fades, when trends fade, when names disappear, and just the feeling remains. That's the kind of legacy Paul believes in.